after the long break between stages for the Overwatch League. I'm your host Shy Guy, and with me, as they will be for pretty much every episode going forward, I've got Darby and Ethan here today, our Hangzhou and Guangzhou beat writers here at the Game Haus. We got the Chinese side of things definitely covered here today. But before we get into all the action, we have to, as we do every week here on WatchHaus, reset our watch and fill everyone in on what we've been up to over the past week and whatnot. So Darby, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Honestly, it's been kind of a hot minute since I was on WatchHaus, so I guess I could go back a couple weeks, just enjoying the break. Been working on House Queens, our other female-aligned show here. I've been doing some writing. I got to meet the Justice when they came to DC, got this shirt. And yeah, just kind of been enjoying some downtime. And that's about it.
Well, that's a pretty good way to spin the break, I gotta say. Ethan, what have you been up to?
Similarly, I have not been on Watch House in quite a little bit. Definitely since before the stage 2 ended. It's been quite a long off season of waiting for teams to start playing again. Personally, I've just been getting done with my college semester, getting back home and getting used to that. But writing a couple articles in the meantime, and really excited to get back into the flow of things now that in just a couple hours we're going to be starting again.
For sure, it's going to be incredibly exciting to see all the action, get back into the swing of things. It feels like we've been gone for a lot longer than just, it was really only like 3 weeks ago that we were watching the Brito Maker pop off in the All-Star game, but it feels like it has been much, much longer than that. So I for one, am incredibly excited to be getting back to, why we're here in the first place. As for me, I've been mostly dealing with a lot of IRL stuff. It's been a long time since I've been on Watch House as well, but I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be doing this regularly with you guys going forward for the rest of the stage and into the rest of the season. So it's gonna be a really fun time. So let's jump right into it. As we said, we're back from the break here in stage 3. So I just want to know, what has you guys the most excited going into week 1? What are you looking forward to in stage 3?
After you.
All right. Honestly, it's been kind of quiet in the break, but a couple of teams have made some pretty big changes, and I think I'm most interested to see how it's going to reflect on the record during the second half of the season. I'm mostly thinking here of the Valiant and the Mayhem. They made some pretty significant roster changes. I'd also consider the Justice and the Charge in that group, just because, the Charge have some new players coming in that have aged up, and the Justice have just sort of been making some org changes that I think are going to reflect more than we think. So I think now that the gap between good and bad teams in the league is getting so much bigger and so much more obvious, it's going to be interesting to see how the underperforming teams who have made changes, as opposed to the ones who haven't, they're mostly thinking of Paris and Houston, just sort of how drastic they're willing to go to have a chance at playoffs now.
For sure, and one other team that has at least one potentially big change coming through this stage, one that I am personally incredibly excited for, is the Chengdu Hunters. They've got a brand new main tank on the lineup. Not sure if he will necessarily be replacing Ameng or anything, but definitely a very interesting pickup for them finally here after a lot of issues. And could give them a little bit of a different element going forward. Ethan, what about you? What has you ready for this stage?
I definitely was thinking a lot of the roster adjustments at the same time. Toronto was another one we didn't really talk about with their new tank line addition, which it should be very interesting to see how that plays out. But I certainly wanted to talk about, I don't think that there's going to be much of a meta shift, but with all of the time in between the stages, you have to think that some of the teams that are near the bottom might be trying to do more meta-breaking strategies. We saw a couple starting in stage 2 a little bit where, you obviously had Chengdu continuing to run Chengdu's. strategies. But then you had teams like doing slight variations on goats on certain maps. I can, of course, certainly think of the Charge running their Doomfist strategy, which actually really helped them out in week 3. You have to wonder if more teams are going to start running these like little niche strategies with one hero off of goats, or maybe even 2, to see how much success they get. So that's what I'm most interested about seeing.
Yeah, it would definitely be nice to see the meta kind of open things up during this next stage. You know, it's been a little bit samey for the most of the season so far. Yes, you've got a few teams that like to be outliers, that like to play a few things differently, but we have seen a lot of triple tank, triple support over the course of 2019, and you know, it would be nice to get potentially a little bit more variety in the mix as we go into stage 3. But something tells me that we're still going to be dealing with a heavy diet of goats for most of this stage. But you know, it's good to hear what you guys are waiting for, and I'm sure everybody is, you know, incredibly eager to get back into the games. But you know, before we talk about any kind of specific matchups this week, which we will certainly get to in just a little bit, first we're gonna do a little bit of buy or sell. And you know how this is going to work. I'm just going to give you a statement, and I want to know whether you buy or sell that, whether you kind of agree with it or you just kind of want to throw that one in the trash. And we're going to start with one of those big changes that Darby was talking about, and that is Fate going to the Florida Mayhem. Now, so the buy or sell for this one is, you know, Fate's addition to the Mayhem is going to significantly change their position relative to the rest of the league, because up to this point they have been a little bit of you know, kind of lagging behind. They have not lived up to kind of expectations, even though those expectations were not very high to begin with. So buy or sell, is Fate going to make the difference for the Florida Mayhem? Let's start with you, Ethan. Darby's gone first on everything, so we'll switch things up.
That is very true. That's a tough one. I think I kind of have to go with sell, and I feel sad about that, but I think Fate being brought in over Swan is certainly a very, very good move, but I think it's much more of a long-term move. I don't think he's going to immediately get synergy with the rest of the team. I think the rest of the team, there's also some other corners they kind of need to adjust. I think their support line in particular needs a little bit of work. But I think that this is a good start, but I don't think their positioning in the standings will dramatically change over the course of the season. I still think that they'll be a bottom 5 team, probably at least, if not more specifically like bottom 3 for the rest of the season.
Okay. Darby?
I'm going to sell. Pretty much for the exact same reasons, honestly. I think it could give them enough of an edge to improve a bit, but I think at this point, Florida's problems run deeper than just the roster. I think there's probably some org stuff that we don't know about that probably needs to be adjusted. I also think, like Ethan said, it's going to take some time to adjust. And I'm sure they've been doing a lot of that between stages, but I think that's going to take too much time for it to matter, at least this stage.
I mean, it's definitely going to be a tough road for the Mayhem. They're already at such a significant disadvantage, but I think, you know, their focus at this point in the season just needs to be on kind of building a foundation for the future, because, you know, there's no way that they're making season playoffs, probably even in the play-in. Even if they went nearly undefeated for the rest of the season, they would have a hard time even making the play-in at this point. So their focus just needs to be on the future, and Fate is a really good building block, but the rest of the pieces just maybe not quite there yet. So
I think
go ahead.
I think you've got a couple good pieces. Like, I think Hagapun and BQB are 2 really good players on the Mayhem right now, at least. But I mean, the Shock, the first year they had a building up year, and look at what the Shock's doing now. If Florida goes by the same strategy, I think that they could really get long-term success.
Certainly. So let's move on to our second one here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Chengdu Hunters. And you know, this is a team that has had a kind of up and down season so far. They've been very inconsistent in their play for a lot of it. Stage 1 came out, really surprised a lot of people with some of the games that they were able to play, taking Vancouver to 5 maps, very nearly being in the hunt for stage playoffs. People expected stage 2 to be the time when they really asserted themselves, really kind of pushed forward, and it never quite happened. They still found themselves with a 3-4 record. So my question to you is this: buy or sell? Chengdu finally breaks through and manages to make the stage playoffs in stage 3.
I'm gonna sell.
Darn
I
it.
think. I think it could help. They have Jachirin now, their new main tank, and that could help. But I think, for the most part, they really started falling off near the end of stage 2. I really think at this point, people kind of have their number, and unless they pull out some new tricks, I really don't see them making it back to top 8. I kind of foresee them being middle of the road for the rest of the season, honestly.
Yeah, I'd also have to sell on that. I feel bad, but for a lot of the reasons that Darby just said, I think that if they bring in a new main tank, it kind of fundamentally changes their strategy, which has been kind of the one thing that's really been working for them. So either they stay with Ameng and be more predictable in a way that other teams might now know how to counter, or they bring in a new main tank and their entire strategy kind of goes out the window, and then you have no guarantee of success. And I think, like you said, all the other teams are kind of starting to get their numbers at least a little bit more. And I just don't see them scoring any higher than they have in past stages, and possibly a little bit lower.
Okay, well, I still believe in you, Chengdu. I will not give up. You're too entertaining to give up on. So even if you're terrible, I'm still gonna watch all of your games no matter what. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think you've got it in you to make the stage playoffs this time. Go out, prove me right, please. But now let's move on to another one of our Chinese teams here, and that is the Hangzhou Spark, who had kind of a renaissance during stage 2. They kind of proved a lot of people wrong, or I guess kind of proved a lot of people right, considering the hype that they had coming into the beginning of the season, and the scrim god rumors that we were hearing about this team, made it seem like they should have been up at the top of the pack in last stage. They finally kind of put it together, came away with 5-2, beat London in the stage playoffs. So my question is this: buy or sell? Hangzhou are now a top 5 team in the Overwatch League. Darby, I think this is all your territory, so we've got to let you kick it off.
I'm going to buy. And I'm sure I'll be regretting that in full, like this time next stage. But, I think the way I see it right now, despite what happened in semifinals, which was a whole tragedy for any Spark fan, I think right now, Titans, Shock, and New York probably kind of in a tier of their own as far as just talent goes. I think among the teams directly below them, Hangzhou is probably among the best. I'd say they're probably still outplayed by the Gladiators, but I'd say they're better right now than Dallas, and they're better right now than London. And honestly, that's where I put them. I put them at the bottom of top 5, but top 5 all the same.
So, because we haven't had enough arguments so far, I will sell on this by saying they're basically probably about 6th or 7th, just so I can avoid saying that I would directly buy on that statement. I think they're good, but I do think that, at least in London's case, I think they might, even though the Spark did beat London last time, I think London overall still might be a bit of a better team. And I do think that Hangzhou are improving, but I don't know if I would consider them top 5 considering what we've seen so far throughout the season. If we looked at just last stage, maybe, but overall, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if they can put together another stage like that, I will be fully convinced. At this point, they are right there on the cusp. They're in that large kind of group of teams that is sitting just below the top tier, which is kind of, in my mind, the most interesting kind of group of teams that we've got in this league. Everyone from about 4 to 10 really has a claim on being in the mix there. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how that plays out over the course of stage 3. Of course, during stage 2, that was pretty hotly contested in terms of like the playoff spots and whatnot. So I'm sure we'll have another great race once it comes down to the end of stage 3 as well. So let's wrap it up here with one of those teams that you mentioned at the very tippy top, at the upper echelons of the league, and that's the Vancouver Titans, who until their stage 2 finals loss against the Shock, RIP me and my hopes and dreams. They were completely undefeated, 19 straight wins to open their Overwatch League debut season. They still have yet to lose a regular season game. So the last question here is, buy or sell, the Titans will finally lose their first regular season game sometime in stage 2.
I love being contrarian. I'm going to say buy, that they will lose a game. Taking a look at their schedule, they play the Gladiators twice, which are not exactly a team to scoff at. We mostly determine they're a top 5 team. They play Chengdu, who took them to a Map 5 before. They play Hangzhou, and they play Atlanta, who took down the New York Excelsior. So, Atlanta could be the kryptonite that takes down any team, and we just don't know it yet.
Don't you put that curse on me.
So I think I'm going to buy into this idea, just for the fun of it.
I'm going to be so mad if it's Atlanta.
Yeah, you know it. No,
they can't.
One team that no one thinks it'll be.
Yeah, no, Atlanta can't beat any of the bottom tier teams that they play. They'll lose to Valiant, give them their first win this season, but they'll knock off NYXL twice and Vancouver in back-to-back stages. It's a bit of a stretch for me, but Darby, what do you think?
I'm also gonna buy, and Ethan totally stole my
Darby!
joke.
Oh no!
My caveat is I don't think because I think everyone's saying if it's gonna be anyone this stage, it'll be the Gladiators. I think they will only lose if it's a big upset. I think it'll either be Valiant or Chengdu.
Their confidence has been shaken, and Atlanta is the first team that they face after their first loss in the Overwatch League. So
it's true. They could come back a little rusty. I know that the players have been kind of traveling to Korea over the break, so might not be as kind of practiced or been scrimming in the off time or whatnot. So they might have slipped a little bit, but I still think the talent on Vancouver is more than enough to carry them at least through Atlanta, I hope. But you guys are right. This is definitely going to be Vancouver's toughest stage to date. They've had, admittedly, a pretty easy schedule for the most part during the first 2 kind of regular stages. They caught the Shock really early before they had kind of fully leveled up. And otherwise they skated through with a few very close wins against teams that probably shouldn't have been in the same league as them. But there's definitely some potential for this team to slip up a little bit, although I hope with my heart of hearts that it doesn't happen. Okay, so let's move on now, and we're at this point going to dive a little bit into what we are calling our game of the week here. And what we're going to do every week on the show is pick one, maybe 2, potentially even 3 if we're in a particularly spicy week. Game that we really want to focus in on and dive into, really give a lot of background about the teams and what we expect out of the matchup. And for this week, that is going to be one of the teams we already talked about, the Hangzhou Spark, taking on the Philadelphia Fusion, who have been their usual inconsistent selves. It plagued them all of Season 1 until the playoffs hit. And now it's kind of rearing its ugly head again in Season 2, where this is a team that is immensely talented, but not quite living up to the level that they are capable of.
Hi, Kate. I know you're in chat.
I'm sorry, Kate. I know it hurts to hear this.
Kate and Darby fighting this week is going to be so sad.
Kate and I are not going to be friends. So I think, and not just because Kate's here, that the Spark and Fusion honestly have a lot in common when it comes to individual skill or play style and record and consistency, or lack thereof. So with all that in mind, I'm actually I think it'll probably be the closest match of the weekend, if not one of the closest ones. I ended up I ended up giving it to the Spark in my preview, which I talked about this game in, by the way, so you should read it. That I ended up giving the edge to the Spark only because of trends where like the Fusion's kind of been middling out. They kind of quietly ended out stage 2 and the middle of the road, I think 11th, tied with the Rain, while the Spark have been trending up. So I think it'll be really, really close, but I'm still going to give it to the Spark, even though I know it's super brave to say it'll go to a map 5 and not have the Fusion win, just because it's the Fusion.
I also gave it to the Spark a little bit. They edged out a little bit for the same reasons, that they're on a bit of an upwards trend, whereas the Fusion have kind of middled out. This could be the Fusion's comeback, where they suddenly come in, absolutely decimate all of their opponents. It's entirely possible for Fusion to do so. So I don't know if I would say that this is going to be a close map, but I think that this is the most easy map to go one direction, have one team completely dominate on either side. Philly could easily come in, just destroy out of nowhere, or Hangzhou could easily take this 4-0. I think that both of the potentials are there. Sorry, Kate. I think the potential is there for both of them. I also think that Philly is a little bit more difficult for them to achieve success in a GOATS meta, and my caveat is if they play Fraggy, it's going to be an easy 4-0 for the Fusion. They will win this just like that. So if they play Fraggy, then my opinion will change.
Luckily, they won't do that.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, Ethan, but I don't think they're going to play Fraggy. I mean, it hurts me too. Like, I want to see Fraggy as much as anyone, if only for, the reason that it would give you more fodder for Tiny Hands memes. But, no, yeah, something has just been a little bit off with the Fusion this year. And, it's incredible because they have such individually talented players that it seems like it should all click no matter what they're playing. But the meta that we're in is just so much about communication and the cohesion within the team that the mechanical skill that they relied on in season 1 is not, it doesn't have the same carry potential when we're playing the GOATS meta that we've been in. Carpe doesn't have the same opportunities to clutch on Widowmaker. He can't just click heads. It's no longer an option for the Fusion to fall back on, and without that, they've looked a little bit lost throughout the season. Even last stage, not even making a stage playoff, which is kind of rough for a team that, in my mind, still considers themselves elite and still wants to be a contender in this league. But they are just a team that I can't quit. For some reason, I always have this kind of unfounded faith in whatever the Fusion are doing, or just basically in their ability to turn things around. I'm always expecting it to happen because it just doesn't make sense to me when they don't. So for that reason, I think this might be the stage. This might be when they finally put it all together. Please, maybe. And I'm gonna go with Philly in this one, although I think it's going to be a really close match or a stop for Hangzhou. I could so easily see this going 3-1, 4-0 easily to the Spark after how good they've looked recently. So that wouldn't surprise me one bit.
It would surprise me. That's because I don't have faith in it.
Relatable.
Fair enough. You're not allowed to have faith in your own team unless you're a San Francisco fan. Even as a Vancouver fan, I'm still scared out of my mind every time Bumper goes for something crazy. So there's no safe fandom in the Overwatch League right now, unless you're the Shock, in which case everything is easy, everything is perfect. Your life
that
is
was
wonderful.
New York last year. So,
yeah.
No, even New York last year was like they would randomly lose maps and make things interesting at times. They would always clutch, so I guess you had that going for you. But no one has made it look quite as easy as the Shock so far this year. Okay, let's move on to our next segment here. which is going to be the WatchHaus Player to Watch, brought to you by Life Alert for when you've fallen and you can't get up.
We have a sponsor.
If we say it enough, maybe it'll actually happen.
Yeah.
I don't think Life Alert is trying to get into the esports scene. Not their demographic, really.
They should sponsor Houston, who's fallen and can't get back up. But
okay.
I'm sorry, it was right there.
It was low hanging fruit, and you took a huge bite out of it. I can't blame you one bit. Okay, so let's go on. Ethan, who's gonna be your player to watch going into this week?
So I'm not positive that the player that I'm going to say for this is going to necessarily be playing, and I wrote about this in my recap as well, or my preview for the week. But I think that, and of course, Guangzhou bias coming out, I think Nero would be the player to look for this week. I've heard a lot of rumors in the past couple of weeks about how much his team is excited for him to be joining them, and how he's like a really insane flex DPS player. And when there's that much kind of rumor going about a player turning 18, like with Decay originally, and Decay immediately popped off as soon as he entered the league, it's kind of one of those situations where there's got to be some truth behind this. And well, I'm not positive whether or not he'll be able to play, because they'll probably keep Happy in, and you have Kib and Eileen vying for that other DPS spot. You have to wonder, do they have something else planned with bringing up Nero, kind of holding on to him during this entire time and picking him onto a mostly Korean roster when he's like clearly not from a Korean-speaking team originally? So that's the player I would definitely keep an eye on. He might not play, but if he does, I would definitely keep an eye on what he's capable of.
Okay, Darby, how about you?
Oh, okay. Mine's got to be LA Valiant's Fact Fiction, Russell Campbell, my boy. Finally back on stage after bench riding for Houston and then doing pretty well for Mayhem Academy. Who, actually, I was worried that I was going to end up in the same boat where I'm like picking a player that might not play, but he confirmed on Twitter he'll play. So I don't know if they're going to start him or they'll try and put Kuki back on the characters he was actually known for. I think he'll probably...
Poor guy, honestly. got put on the Lucio despite never playing the hero, playing main tank all his career.
Time.
But he wasn't on he wasn't on the bench. We don't talk about that. But yeah, and now he might be stuck behind Fact Fiction. But I am incredibly excited to see Fact back on the Overwatch League stage. He was, I thought, a very solid player for Houston last year, but Mumo was just the better option for them. So he didn't see the stage a whole lot. But I'm excited to have him back in the mix here today. For me, it probably has to be Decay on the LA Gladiators. He has been a huge part of their kind of turnaround at the beginning of the season. They started very slowly, waiting for him to activate and get into the lineup, but since then they have gone on a tear. They've been really good up until the very end of stage 2, where they dropped a couple games that were not the best. They lost their last game of the regular stage, and then of course got swept out of the playoffs by New York. And like we mentioned earlier, they are one of those teams kind of vying for that potential top spot, or top spot in kind of that second tier of teams. They can very easily claim to be the number 4 team in the league, and that's what their standings last stage would kind of suggest to you. But they have still had their problems, but the Decay has been a shining star for them, and they've got a big week here where they can really prove that they belong. If they are playing Dallas first on Friday, and then they close out the week in the very last game against Vancouver. And no, I'm not expecting them to take Vancouver down. It's definitely kind of a game where they can make a statement. If they can hang with Vancouver, that tells you a lot about where they sit in terms of the power rankings, or just how you want to look at the league. They will have kind of asserted themselves and given themselves a really good opportunity going forward for the rest of the stage.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get down to the real reason why we and probably everyone else is here, and that is of course the predictions, where we are going to take a look at not every single game, because there are 16 games in an Overwatch League week. That's a lot for us to go through, and we really wouldn't have a chance to break down like we want to. So we're picking out our favorite games, the ones we might have some disagreements on, the ones where we think there are really interesting matchups at play. We're going to go through them here on the show. And then kind of behind the scenes, everyone who is involved with the WatchHaus preview show, there are about 8 of us, will be making weekly predictions where we go through, pick the winner for every single game. We'll be keeping a running tally of everyone's record, throwing that up on the screen so everyone can see your shame when you've gone, 5-11 for a week or something. So we'll have all of that there next week. But for right now, we're gonna kick things off with some of our the matchups we're most excited for this week, and we'll start out with something right up your alley, Ethan, with Chengdu going up against the Guangzhou Charge.
Yeah, I'm predicting Guangzhou, obviously, because I'm biased, and yeah, but I do have reasons for it. I do. My first of that is that I made a post about this on Twitter, but the first time these two faced off was both of their first matches of the season. I believe it was on the second day. Neither of them had been on stage before. It was a very close match, and I remember watching it. That Hotba on the Charge was the only player who looked like he was actually playing well, because the rest of them had never been on stage before. They're extremely nervous. Chengdu certainly had their number, and it was played close, but in the end, Chengdu took it. Now, Guangzhou has a lot more experience under their belt. They have a lot of experienced players. They've played some of the best, they played the Titans up until a Game 5 at one point. They've had a rough stage in Stage 2, but they've started to bounce back. They're on a 2-game win streak, nearly 3 actually, but they barely lost the one before that. But they're a lot more experienced now, and most of the teams, like we said before, are starting to kind of have Chengdu's number, figure them out a little bit more. They could throw in a curveball with their new main tank, but overall, I think Guangzhou is really looking for revenge in this match, and I think that they could take it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a kind of toss-up match here this week, and this is, in my mind, it has the potential to tell us a lot about where these two teams stand, because they both had promising Stage 1 performances. People had pretty decent expectations for the teams going into Stage 2, and neither of them really kind of held up their end of the bargain in that regard. So now Stage 3 is their opportunity to come back. I still believe in Chengdu, especially now that they are not kind of locked into that unorthodox style that they've been playing. They now have more options available to them with Jerkin coming over into the lineup. They just have a little bit more variety that they can throw at you. They have the option to play conventionally. So I think this is going to be a really close and obviously very entertaining matchup, given the styles that these two teams play. But I am kind of leaning Chengdu at this moment.
I'm also leaning Chengdu. I feel bad about it, at least.
My heart, but go on.
I honestly, for the same reasons, I think that flexibility that they've got now might just give them the edge they need. I think especially, I don't know what the Charge is thinking right now. Obviously, I don't know. They have the 2 new players who have aged up. They have Rise and Nero. If they play them, I mean, you kind of run the risk of the first time on stage nerves. And I don't know if they'll play them all 4 maps. I really don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here. It's my job. But I think between them trying to integrate 2 new players and Chengdu also trying to integrate a new player, but also having some room to kind of surprise people, I think Chengdu still got the edge.
But you don't have all the facts, and that is that I love them. So,
well, honestly,
so me and Yakisoba Sam will just go over here in the Guangzhou support corner.
Yeah. Actually, no, you've changed my mind with your emotional plea there,
Yes.
Ethan. Not really.
Okay, that's fair. You've
Don't
already
ban
locked
it.
him in. You've locked him in.
I know.
You have to,
I can't change it. I have honor in my picks. I make them. They're locked in. I'm not allowed to change them. I have. A man's got to have a code, and that's mine. So let's move on here, and we'll talk next about two teams that again are looking to have kind of bounce back stage threes, and that is the Paris Eternal going up against the Toronto Defiant. Now, Toronto, as we mentioned briefly earlier, is going to potentially be incorporating two new tank players into their lineup. Gods and Shark both coming into the lineup from the Montreal Rebellion, coming up from the Academy team. And now they've got the challenge of working with a mixed roster, which is not something they had to really worry about before now. The communication issues could be a problem considering that call-up really only happened a couple weeks ago. It has not been a significant amount of time that they've been with the team. So they've got some hurdles to pick. And on the other side, Paris has just not been able to put it together so far this season. And just it's really been very, very tough for them across the board. For me, I'm very hopeful for what these changes can do for Toronto in particular. I think Shark has the potential to be a major upgrade at the main tank position. So for that reason, I am gonna I'm gonna stick my neck out and pick them, even though Paris I think might be the safer choice.
Our crew is very divided on this. Just taking a look at the spreadsheet, I think we are exactly 4-4 in both teams' favors.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Paris has practiced over the break. I know a lot of them went home, but I'm sure they've gathered around again. But I really think I have to see them in action before I believe they revamped very much during the break. I just don't see it going very different than it's been going. So I'm going with Toronto as well.
I mean, I originally went with Paris, and I will stick with that because that is my call. But I did just look at the last game that was played between both of them. It was against each other, and Toronto 4-0'd Paris. So that's not really a great sign now that I'm really looking at my own prediction. I will stick with my Paris guns though, and say both teams had a 2-5 last stage. And while Toronto has made some changes, so they'll have possible trouble integrating their new tank line, Paris has really kept a lot consistent. And although this is the exact opposite of the argument I use while describing Houston, I think that this consistency from the last stage at least allows them to not have new issues to deal with. Might be a little bit easier for them to continue on. And they won the first game of last stage, so maybe Paris will win the first game of this stage. Grasping at straws. I'm sorry, Kate. This is not an easy. I was trying to be contrarian here. I'll admit.
Kate, I'm sorry.
Kate, I'm sorry. I was really just trying to create diverse picks. Come on, Paris.
There's still potential for them to turn things around a little bit in stage 3. They've had a rough go of it, but there's still a lot of talent on that roster as well. So
it does have a lot of depth on it, so they could pull up new people who we haven't seen like they did with Nico last time.
Definitely, there's definitely ways to kind of rejigger the roster and maybe strike gold with something. So there's definitely potential there. But let's move on to two teams that are again right in that kind of middle pack of teams, all trying to climb their way to the top, and that is the London Spitfire going up against the Boston Uprising. Now, I don't think any of us are in disagreement on this pick.
Hold up a sec.
Can I interrupt? Are you reading chat?
Am I reading chat?
Yeah, the
oh no!
Screen.
Oh no! I fixed it. Oh god! I'm a papega. I'm a smooth brain. I'm an absolute dunce. But it happens. So we're back and ready to go. I should not mess around with Discord. Sorry, this is my first production, so you'll have to bear with me, everybody. Thank you for the heads up that I'm making a fool of myself.
We got a bit.
I'm making a fool of myself in more ways than one. And not just with my predictions, also with my production skills. So let's get back into it. The London Spitfire going up against the Boston Uprising. Ethan, how do you see this one shaking out?
London Spitfire going up against Boston Uprising. I think it will be a close game. Boston's a bit on a downward trajectory, though, and London has shown mixed results, but I think that they've shown relatively recently that they are still a top team. I think I would definitely consider them top 8. Boston, I think I consider just falling out of the top 8 recently. I think London probably has this more likely. I don't really have that many reasons for it. I just think London looks like they've been kind of finding their groove a bit more lately, and Boston's been struggling. So maybe Boston found their groove, but it's London for me.
Yeah, it's also London for me. I think Boston's still, despite what happened in Stage 2, I would still go out on a limb and say Boston's a good team. I just think right now London's a better team. I think they've shown that they're better at kind of adapting, and just in terms of individual skill, I think they're just gonna outplay Boston. I think that's really the most I've got as far as justification for it.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential on this Boston team. They are, very well coached. They have a great shot caller in Fusions, and I think he's the kind of player that gives you a shot in nearly every match that you play. Boston plays a lot of really, really close games, and I think that Fusions is a big part of kind of keeping them, in games that they might otherwise not have necessarily the talent to, stick with. But in this case, London, like you said, I think they've kind of figured out their issues, at least when it comes to the 3-3 meta and what they need to do within the confines of GOATs. They are looking much better than they were to start the season, and we've got teams on downward trajectories, but I think Boston's in for a bounce back stage regardless of how this particular match goes. I could very easily see them back in stage playoffs for Stage 3, so they're definitely one that I'll be keeping an eye out for through the rest of the stage. All right, we've got a couple more games to get into here, and the first in my mind is probably one of the most interesting matchups we've got on the entire week. Our picks don't necessarily differ here, but this is one that, in my mind at least, has a lot of upset potential, and that's the Dallas Fuel taking on the LA Gladiators, trying to go for that upset and really assert themselves, prove that they belong in the upper echelon of this league. Now, I am gonna go with LA here. I think they have the talent. Like I said, Decay was one of my players to watch this week, and I think he is an absolute superstar for this team. They have played really well around him at times, and if they can just fix a few kind of minor things that gave them issues towards the end of Stage 2, I think they'll be a very dangerous team for the rest of the season, and even going into playoffs at the end of the year. Just an immensely talented squad, but Dallas definitely showed last stage that they are not a team to kind of be ignored or pushed aside.
I would argue that the Gladiators are, I'm going with the Gladiators too, and I would say they're the better team, but I'd argue that Dallas is also kind of at least trying to fight to be among those top teams in the second tier anyway. They're kind of trying to, and I mean, besides their playoff stompings, they've been doing pretty well, and I feel like they've been growing. I think they'll definitely make LA work for it, which I think is why I'm far more interested in this one than I am Vancouver Gladiators. I think this will be the more interesting of the two games to watch. Or at least it's more up in the air,
Yeah, I have a very similar opinion. I also picked the Gladiators. I think this could be potentially close because the Fuel have been certainly showing a lot more signs of life lately. And they've also got Trill now. That's a signing we didn't even talk about because it happened so long ago. but not sure if he'll play over OGE. But you do have a lot going for the fuel. I think the Gladiators can edge it out because it is very, very certain that they are kind of the 4th place team at this point. And while them in New York kind of seem a bit close, I don't think anyone has been able to really catch up to those two where they are. And we've kind of been talking about who's in that 5th place, but we've never really had an issue of who's in that 4th, and it is the LA Gladiators. So I really do think that there's potential for upset, but I really do think that the Gladiators kind of have this.
Yeah, and I mean, in my mind, this stage is the time that LA has to really kind of put a stranglehold on that 4th spot, and if they want to be able to jump up and contest those top teams, this is where it starts. You've got to take care of the teams that are supposed to be just a little bit below you. You have to be able to do that if you want to be able to be considered one of those top teams, and this is Gladiators' chance to do that, to start things off. So now we've got one more match to get into here. And that is, we're going back to the Chengdu Hunters, taking on the LA Valiant, who, as we mentioned earlier, have a lot of new additions coming into the roster here. Fact Fiction, Shax joining the team, Apply as well. So they've definitely got an influx of new players that can give this team a new look, and make them a bit more dangerous than they've been so far during this season. But Darby, do you think that's enough for them to take down Chengdu?
Not this time. A lot of my hesitation that's left with the Valiant is just that I don't entirely know where all these pieces are going to go. I think it's fairly obvious. We got Fact Fiction. We know where he's going. I don't know if we're going to split time with Space and McGravy. I'm not entirely sure where Shax is going to fit in yet, but I think if they know, this will be a lot closer than I think it is. But in the meantime, I'm still going to go with Chengdu.
Stage 2, Week 5. Valiant beats Chengdu 3-2. Just saying. I might have picked this pick kind of just to stir more attention, but Valiant's beaten Chengdu before and in their last match. So we can see it again. They have new players now. Chengdu, same argument I had before. They're kind of dropping off, in my opinion. So, Valiant, they might have this. Boom.
No, it's definitely on the table here. The fact that they beat them last stage is interesting, but it's going to be hard to draw conclusions from anything that Valiant team did with Fate on the roster, without their new additions as well. So I think they're going to have a little bit of a learning curve here this week. They're not going to be as clean as they otherwise would be. And in my mind, that gives Chengdu an edge, especially with the way that they play. They can catch teams off guard, if they aren't, fully practiced and aren't fully ready for it. And with as little time as they've had together, it's going to be hard for Valiant to be that prepared. But they've been on the up and up. They've been, trending in the right direction so far. During stage 2, at least, they kind of started to turn things around. This could help them continue that trajectory and maybe knock off the Hunters here this week. I just don't quite think it's going to happen, and I do have to go with Chengdu here. So that about covers what we have for this week. Those are the predictions that we're going to go into. But first, we are going to be introducing a brand new segment, one that I think you and we especially are very much going to enjoy. Almost everyone. One person might not like this segment, but that is going to be Rob's terrible pick of the week, where every week we're going to rag on our boss and tear into him for one of the idiotic picks he has made for the coming week. And this one is definitely a head scratcher here to kick things off. And that is Rob taking the Gladiators over the Titans here to close out week 1 to get the first ever victory over the Titans in the regular season. And I just got to ask, what were you thinking, Rob?
I mean, we joked about it earlier, but I don't actually think that the Gladiators are going to beat the Titans. Out of any team, I think that might be one of the least likely because of how much the Vancouver Titans will probably prepare for the Gladiators, knowing how close in standings they are. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I just can't imagine it.
Rob, what are you thinking?
I'm telling you, if anyone's going to beat the Titans, it's going to be a major upset.
Yeah.
It'll be the Valiant.
It'll be at the Atlanta. It won't be the Gladiators. If we're kind of having a discussion of how close the Dallas Gladiators game is going to be, what makes you think that they're going to have like a chance with the Titans?
Yeah, that's fair. We think about stage 2 playoffs. Gladiators got swept out by New York, who then pretty much got dismantled by Vancouver in the next round. So I do not have a lot of faith in this, but good on you, Rob, for sticking up for the underdogs here.
If he's right and we're all wrong, we're totally gonna be like ashamed.
We just have to quit at that point. We can never do this show again.
We'll be an independent entity sponsored by Life Alert.
After one episode.
It was a good run, guys.
Shut down.
Okay, well, that is going to do it for us here. We're going to get out of here with just enough time for you to go catch Watch Point, get ready for this week's Overwatch League action. I hope you've enjoyed the scuffed production, the memes, and because I know we had a good time here.
I enjoyed this so much.
But thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Darby. Thank you, Ethan. As always, I am your host, Shy Guy, from our house to yours. Thank you for watching.